if I can poke a little bit more on that,
Yeah.
because it's always interesting to learn that strategy, because I coming from my background was pretty much direct to consumer background.
Mm.
So like, hey, just go to clients and sell it and install it. So now when I see the partner program, it has a compelling value, right? You cannot be everywhere. It reduces overhead, and also helps you focus on the product, right? That's very important in a robotics field where things are changing at a light speed. So new product development, helps you develop on the product. But I think one thing that it or at least from my understanding, and I would like to correct myself as well if that's not the right understanding, is like you are insulated from the customer, right? Like, and how do you I'm sure you have a solution for that, but like how do you solve for that? Usually install happens, and then it's pretty much done deal, it works, it great, and if it doesn't work, they'll call the local support to solve for it. How do you get the feedback, or how would you, or what mechanisms have you implemented to solve for that?
A very good point again, right? Like even we went through this cycles that okay, how to ensure we are not losing that direct feedback of the customer, right? And one of the things that we do, by the way, is that all the initial deployments that our partners are doing, we are in loop with them in the sense that we are on the field. Like our team would go on the field as well, understand the customer pain points, make sure we are doing the right thing with the customer. We work with our partners to figure out that whatever they are proposing to the end customer is also aligned, both from the capability point of view and kind of like the user pain point of view, right? It takes hard work. It takes the scaling becomes slower again because we have to be part of the loop here, right?
Hello, everyone. My name is Parth Pithani, and today I'm joined by Rishabh Agarwal from Peer Robotics. He's a good friend of mine. We hung out together in Modex 2024 this year. I learned a lot. Pretty inspiring journey of his. A rising star, if you ask me, in the robotics world. He has a solid product that I'm actually a fan of. I told him that this is something I wanted to develop when I was thinking about robotics. So I'm already a fan of his product, and I'm glad that he's going to spend some time with us today. Rishabh, why don't you go ahead and give a brief introduction about yourself?
Thank you, Parth. Thank you, first of all, for having me on the podcast and really exciting to share what we've been doing. And yeah, it was a fun trip, Modex, right? Like we showed the robot and had a good time around there. So yeah, just a quick, brief intro about myself. I come from a manufacturing family, grew up in a kind of industrial environment, right? From a small part of India, like the western side of India. Did my bachelor's in mechanical engineering, then worked on towards kind of getting specialization in robotics, worked on systems side of things, so learning more from mechanical perspective, electrical perspective, the science perspective, like what makes a robot, not any single one of this. Worked in Germany with Siemens while doing my PhD in Siemens. I didn't complete it, so dropped the PhD to start Peer Robotics. And yeah, here we are.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, that was my next question. Like, what inspired you? Like, that was my very first question. Like, what inspired you to work in robotics? I come from mechanical engineering, and to a level, I remember when I was an undergrad, in 2010, I think 2009 or 10, I was working on line follower robots, and those are the robotic workshops
Yeah.
in colleges. So I used to work there. I enjoyed that space, and then I went to, of course, everyone goes to IIT Mumbai for the Tech Fest, right? So I went there. I had my robot as well there. No doubt we got hammered in the very first round, but it was a fun experience working in robotics. And I think I always had that itch, if you will, to work in robotics, and that's how I am here. So I'll be curious to know about your history and like what specific instances really inspired you to keep working in robotics field.
I think first of all, IIT Bombay, every robotics engineer from India would have gone to IIT
Yeah,
Bombay, so
yeah,
that's a good thing for us.
yeah.
But coming back, while growing up, kind of like in the manufacturing environment, I always saw my dad, my grandfather, kind of like playing along with machines. Right? They're not engineers, by the way. Like none of them are. They're proper business people. But they had to run their factories, so they had to learn how these machine works, and if something stops, how they can make it work again, right? So I always saw my dad and my grandfather kind of tinkering along with different machines. So I was always inclined towards machinery per se. So my initial inclination was not robotics, but more on mechanical systems and machines. And that's why when I joined IIT Delhi, mechanical was the focus. Like, okay, I want to build machines. That was like my core interest. Then suddenly I got introduced to this professor called Professor S.K. Saha. He's still a very good advisor, mentor of ours. Like whenever I'm in dilemma, I go reach out to him for
Nice.
both, like life advisors and technical advisors.
Nice.
Depends on which phase I'm at. But he quickly kind of showed me the world of robotics in that sense that, how things are happening and how mechanical engineering is actually evolving in robotics. Like if you think of it, machines are transitioning into robotics, right? Um, so yeah, quickly started working along with him in the labs and then in the robotics club. Then we participated in the Tech Yantra in IIT Bombay. Then Robocon, I don't know if you know that. That's another
Yeah.
competition
Yep.
happens in Pune.
Yep.
For 4 years we did that. So yeah, one thing after the other. Then and once someone is hooked on robotics, they're hooked. Like nothing else feels that good.
Yeah, it's so funny that you mentioned that because I was just looking at my journey and I was like, why robotics? Like, when did that itch started? And I was talking to my wife. I was like, I think it goes back to my undergrad days because
Yeah,
that's when I started working on it. I think it was my second year when we, I think, started working on it. Or first, second year actually. I started working on it, and I like, okay, this looks fun. This is fun, and then eventually, of course, America is a consumer nation, so manufacturing is always a less, but
yeah,
moving is important. Moving products from one coast to other coast is important, and that's why I started getting into it. But I always had that itch that how should I marry robots and warehousing space,
yeah.
and I think that's how. So it's pretty interesting to learn about people's journey into robotics field. That's cool. That's awesome. I think now, as you mentioned about the professor at IIT Delhi and in the advices that you get, I think one of the advice I think I would love to get from you as an industry perspective is like you developed a product, you developed Peer Robotics, you developed the platform for that, and so it's a basically a new product development process. And I think for the audience and for myself as well, like how, what are the steps that it goes from ideation to an actually first proof of concept? How do you think about it? What steps comes into that picture? There are no specific yeah, like methodical steps that I'm trying to learn, but more about like how it works, like just a high
Hmm.
level thing.
So I think like I can share our journey a little bit. It's never a straight line for sure, right? So it's always like zigzag trying to figure out, updating in real time. But one thing that separates different robotics companies, like there are many robotics companies right now. Everyone is building different products, and a lot of people are solving the same problem because we are not being there yet. Like everyone is still trying to solve that problem. And I think what differentiates every company, apart from the core functionality, let's say go a little bit narrow and say that we make these autonomous mobile robots. Of course, autonomous navigation should work, autonomous localization should work, and some of those base core functionalities should work. But when you take a step back and say, okay, what separates the companies apart from just those things is actually you decide on some fundamentals when you are in the ideation phase, which is who is your customer? How are you going to cater to that customer? And what do you think kind of would be their need in the long term, right? Not just today, not just with this product, but let's say 5, 10 years down the line, how their need would evolve, right? How their engagement with this product would evolve. And I think every company would make a different set of decisions for those things. Let's say autonomous AMRs, like autonomous navigation is working for all the companies. Then it comes on like who's your user? Is it a warehousing? Is it a manufacturing? In manufacturing, is it a person on the shop floor or is it an operations manager? In warehousing, is it like a assisted picking kind of pickers who are the users or is it sorters who are the users? So you kind of start making those decisions that who is your user and your solution evolves based on that. And in fact, some of the product features evolve based on that. Like how am I going to build the dashboard? Do I want to give the user this feature that they would have to kind of use? Or can I make that intelligence incorporated in the robot that would limit the areas it would be used, but at the same time, kind of, make life easier for that user? So it's like a lot of back and forth between the team, between the users, and trying to understand whether we give this feature, is it going to make their lives easier or actually more complicated, because now they have to deal with this thing as well, which they don't know or have not dealt with before. So our philosophy at Peer had been that we are taking a little bit of more mixed approach of Apple and Google, like, because we think that it's not just the end users that interact with the platform. Like, as a systems approach, I would say there are multiple users on our system, and every user has different requirements. And how to marry it in the same product has been a challenge, but that's what we've been doing with ideation and prototyping, and then going back and then going back, right? So we have system integrators that we work along with, and you can think of it that we provide a different set of features for our system integrators. And then we have the end users who might be, first of all, our operation managers or a line operator, and then how the feature set would differ for them, each of them. So that's what we've been doing. And it's in robotics, you can't isolate software from hardware or hardware from the dashboard of the intelligence. It's all together.
Yeah.
You draw lines and then you tell people to constantly break those lines.
Yeah. No, that's a good that's a good insight. I think I wanna put a little bit of emphasis on like customer feedback, right? How do you, in your ideation phase, how do you go and chase for that customer feedback? Because we always have like an hypothesis. Like, I come
Yeah.
from a services side, I always have an hypothesis that this is a customer problem I'm trying to solve, and we have this something called validation call that, hey, based on the data, this is what I'm looking at. We think that you need to improve here, here, and here. What is are we looking at the same picture as you? A, and second is, what is the priority out of these three problems that you're facing? So from your product development perspective, uh, how do you try to get the customer feedback incorporated in all these conversations?
Very good point. And I would say like it's broken down almost into two layers. One is that access to the customer, which is the harder part. And to be honest, like it took us a lot of time to kind of talk to the right people in the industry to get the right feedback per se, right? Or the ideal customer profile, to talk to the ideal customer profile. Once we have that access though, then it's a little bit simpler problem, which is like constantly talking about what they are struggling with, right? So we did this. We were trying to sell some solution before to one of our first customer. We had no robots. We just went in. We were like, hey, we are building this. Are you interested? The access part was difficult. It took us like almost 4 or 5 months to understand or get into a lot of different manufacturings to make sure that it's a generalized problem rather than just like one specific problem. But that being said, once we got into it, they actually changed our problem statement. Like when we went with them, like, okay, are you struggling with this? The initial hypothesis was wrong. Not completely wrong, but it needed to be pivoted. There
Hmm.
were some points that were aligned, some points that we thought were a problem, but were actually not a problem. So we pivoted around those points. So access was difficult, but once we got access to it, talking to the customers and understanding their pain points helped a lot. Like just pivoting ourselves and just throwing out the initial hypothesis as well. And there are some people who won't give time for that. There are some people who would give time for that. And that's where the access problem will come again, which is the data set needs to be big enough that you're
Yeah,
getting right feedback in.
yeah, and it's such an important point. Honestly, I think a lot of, and I think this feedback also applies to any new product development,
Yeah.
irrespective of robots, right? I think with what you mentioned about the access, and then of course finding right individuals who will talk to you, give you what are they facing and how to solve for it. I think it's very important because I do see a lot of companies struggle with it. Like they, um, what I see is that they have a solution and they're trying to find a problem, and that is always, in my opinion, is not the best approach. Always, you want to find a problem and then solve for it. So no, that's definitely an important access and finding the right people and working on that. I think one other thing also I'm trying to, I, again, I try to look at the product development, new product development from a robotics perspective. I've been I like to follow news a lot, and I think one of the thing that I've been very curious, and I was watching Nvidia this year, the GTC conference, and I think they do have a good. At least I feel like from the marketing that they had was like there were good solutions at least that
Mm.
can be incorporated in a new product development, right? The Isaac and the digital twins and the and even just the large language models from the Chat GTP side. I think those that they definitely remove some of the barriers that probably you might have seen it while you were developing a product, new product. So help me or help the audience actually think through it. Like what, let's say 5 years ago or 6 years ago, when we were developing a product, what challenges you face, and today as of 2024, they might be like a plugin which could help you
Mm.
solve for it, right? Help us understand the contrast that development has happened.
No, I think to begin with, like Nvidia is a big enabler in any tech ecosystem, I would say. Like not just in robotics, you pick different ecosystems, and over the years, from my limited understanding and kind of just watching it from an outside perspective, they've been enabling different spaces. And that's a phenomenal thing for every new founder because like you want those tech enablers to exist. So to begin with, like yes, NVIDIA enabled a lot of technologies, and I think right now we are already using a lot of NVIDIA packages, and we are already working on that. We have a complete RTX 2016 report, by the way.
Oh.
So we are running a full-fledged graphic card. So processing cameras and like running some several algorithms on top of our platform on the edge, we are able to do it because of NVIDIA. If NVIDIA wouldn't be there, I don't know how we would have solved that problem. That we would have tried to find out some solution, but it would have taken us way longer and probably not that good quality, right?
Mhm.
So NVIDIA definitely enabled that, but we are seeing this across the board. And I think that's one of the fundamentals that we focus on Peer Robotics as well, which is like how we can partner with companies who are enabling different aspects of the, let's say, the ecosystem. Like I'll give an example. There is one company called InOrbit. I don't know if you know them.
Oh yeah,
InOrbit,
Florian,
yeah,
right? Yeah, yeah,
Florian. Yes,
yeah.
yes, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So we work with them, and the idea is that how they enable essentially end users to run several robots on a same fleet, right? That's the core kind of enabling feature for their platform, and which is a must because let's say if every customer can only choose one company and that one company has to solve all their robotics problems, that's a nightmare, right? Like it's too much burden on that one company, and the customer is first of all not able to solve their problems. They're not getting the good quality solutions. But I think InOrbit is enabling that, which is like, hey, you can have two, three different brands of robots, run them together, and they're solving your different problems.
Hmm.
So in the end, the industry is collaborating and the user is getting what they want.
Correct.
Similarly, there is another company, Reshape, that we work
Mhm.
with, and they are solving another part of the equation, which is like if a customer goes out and tries to find the solution, there's so much noise. How do you filter out that this is what we want or this is what it fits your specific requirement? So Reshape created this platform where essentially AI enabled, and the whole idea is that you can go in and ask the platform, I want these solutions in my lines. What is the best thing, or what are the four alternatives that I can choose from? So I think our whole industry is evolving towards collaboration, and we can see that like all across. There are different companies partnering up, and that's a good sign. And I
Yeah.
think Nvidia is enabling a lot of those companies on the back end. So
Interesting. No, that is definitely interesting because I'm just thinking from my side of the world. I feel like there is something that I'm actively exploring is the digital twin, and
Yeah.
I feel like there is a lot of value that it can provide from a design perspective, and doing that what if scenarios, if you will. I don't have to go back to always my tableaus and the Excel sheet to do the analysis. I can just do digital twin and do all this work. So that's good to know for sure.
On that we will definitely talk later as well because we've been working in the company as well to see how we can give more value to our users, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Like, and that's what I said, like 5 years, 10 years down the line, how our users would be interacting with the robots. That's the decision we make today, or at least put some effort into making that decision today,
Makes sense.
right? So, and that is one of the areas. So digital twin and some of the other kind of feedback loops for the user plus robot in the same arena, like
Yeah.
that's an interesting space that is going to evolve.
Oh, that's for sure. So we did talk a lot about good things about robots, right? Robots are gonna help us. Robots are gonna definitely, and I agree. I mean, I'm a robot advocate, anyways. But there are adoption. I see it every day, right? In adoption hurdles, I see it every day. I try to educate the industry on my side of the world, but I think there are adoption hurdles for any robotics company, at least in this Talking about warehouse robotics, there are education hurdles, there are change management hurdles, there are training hurdles, there is cost hurdle. So from your perspective, like what are the hurdles you are seeing from the adoption perspective, and like if you have to solve it, how would you solve
Good point. I mean, so there are quite a few that you have already mentioned that all of us are seeing, right? Like we are also seeing those hurdles, especially in the side of that, okay, how do you bring to the user what is possible, what is not possible, apart from just, let's say, the small segment that you might already be connected with, right?
it?
And then the time cycle hurdle, like how long it takes to validate whether this is the right solution or not, is also a big hurdle for any startup, right? For a
Hmm.
big company, yes, they can take that horizon for, let's say, a year down the line, 2 years down the line for getting the first, let's say, order. For a startup, you need to move fast. So how can you reduce that time cycle? It's a big kind of challenge that we are trying to figure out. Then on top of it, since we focus a lot more on manufacturing side of things, intralogistics and manufacturing side of it, we are trying to figure out that how we can do brownfield automation way more than greenfield, right? So certain factories are similar, certain factories are completely different. So how do we incorporate the intelligence on the platform, which is a technical problem, I would say. We're still dealing with that problem and still trying to evolve that problem, which is how do you incorporate the intelligence on the platform that the platform can make a decision what kind of facility it is in, right? So that they can make the right parameter choices. Like that's coming back to that same question we had. Like, how do you give this feature to the user, or do you incorporate it as an intelligence on the platform, right?
Hmm.
So like your iPhone knows it's outside or it's inside, and it changes the brightness autonomously. Like, you're not kind of like going in and changing it constantly. Once in a while you might have to, but you don't really need to.
Hmm.
So those kind of decision making in the robots are going to evolve, and that's a big hurdle that we are trying to solve. That we don't have access to all those plans. So do we train them on simulation first and then hope it would work, which probably never works. There are some things you can train, but not to an extent that it works seamlessly. Or how do you get that feedback early on in your product development? So that's a big hurdle. Then I mentioned that distribution is a big hurdle.
Hmm.
How do you even reach out to the end user? Like, how would the funny part is like marketing is so isolated, right? Like, sorry, manufacturing is so isolated that there is a manufacturer in Ohio, there is a manufacturer in Connecticut, and they might be doing the same thing but two different ways, right? How would you give them the message that this is a solution that is available for you? So that's also another challenge that we are trying to solve. So it's interesting. It's a
Yeah.
good problem that keeps us awake, but
No,
we are
I can
trying to
see
figure
that
out.
actually. That's the challenge. So from a warehousing perspective, I always want to talk to warehouse operators or basically warehouse directors, warehouse GMs, because I think they are responsible for the P&L of that building, so they
Hmm.
understand what problems they have and what needs to be solved. So I always want to talk to them, but the thing is, it's very hard to find
Yeah.
because they are always busy, always on the floor, always striving to solve problems. So it's very important to find that time. But once you find it, you want to get as much information as you can from them because they're always busy. And I can tell you from the first hand, they have so many fires to fight.
Yep.
So it's
Yep.
always they are always super occupied, and but they are the best one to understand the problems that one warehouse is facing, or one site is facing to solve for it. So I completely agree. I think from your side, manufacturing for me is warehouse operators
Yeah.
who are like, oh man, they are fighting fires every day.
True.
Yeah,
And that's what we're trying to do, right? Solve their
yeah,
problems, but it's gonna take some time, and hopefully we can start doing a little.
correct. Yeah, definitely. And I think that's what I think the message is. Like, we understand you're busy, but we are trying to help you out, right?
Yeah.
That's an message that I think we should resonate with them as well as we reach out to them. Um, So one factor you mentioned about the education, we talked about the complexity, the cost, but I think one other factor that I've been seeing a lot folks are talking about is around maintenance and
Mm.
like after support services and sales, if you will, services, if you will. So there are two parts to it, right? First, from product development perspective, what is how do you think about maintenance when you develop a product? Uh, is like what thought goes into building a maintenance low maintenance product, if you will? And two, how do you enable that after sales, after selling a robot? How do you enable that maintenance support for them?
So I think this is how the automotive also scaled, right? If we think about it, how the cars were made and T model did is just that, right? Model T did was that how we can make it simple enough that people can repair it, or these mom and pop repair shops can start coming up so that they know how to take care of these systems, right? And in robotics, I think it has to be the same way. It has to be the DIY way, which is happening in the phones and laptops and all that, the intelligence is there, there's no doubt, but the platform itself is simple enough that anyone can repair, or not anyone, but at least someone with a base level of training can do service maintenance and swapping of different components as and when required, right? And uh, when we started Peer, we were very clear that we are not gonna sell direct, and we are not gonna kind of just do entire thing on our own. We only sell via our partners. So we have system integrators that are there to provide local service and maintenance. And that's the kind of like backbone on which we think we can scale automation, which is the customers can get that sense of comfort plus that phone number of the person who's like right in their backyard that, hey, I'm using your platform. If something comes up, you're there to support me, right? That's a very big confidence level. Like I'm pretty sure you would deal with this constantly, which is like price, lead time, everything is one thing, and then the support, right? How would
Yeah,
you make sure it's running in my field by not just saying that, oh, it has 99% OE? It's like, no, how
yeah,
would you make sure of that?
yeah.
And I think that's the answer. Like you need to enable people to make sure of it. So there are two things. One is that platform should be simple enough that anyone on the factory floor also can do it. But even going beyond that, maybe you don't actually want people on the factory floor to take time on this because you don't want their time to be gone into repairing robots or doing service and maintenance of the robots. So how can you enable ecosystem that can support that? So we've been developing product from that mindset. Um, like we train all our partners how to swap things out in the robot, how to do service maintenance. We've developed everything which is like plug and play as much
Mm.
as possible. Um, in fact, our partners are the CAD models of our robots,
Nice.
complete CAD models and all. So they know every component, they have access to it. It's not proprietary at all for our partners. We don't publish it online or as a kind of like we're not open source today, but I don't see a reason why we can't be with the hardware at least in next few years.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. So let me poke a little bit on that. What was the when you were developing Peer and like as a robotics company? I think this at least I know there are few companies who does this partner model. What's the driving motivation to go not direct but go to the partner model? What are the things you would consider? What you things you would have considered saying that okay, I don't want to go direct. I have partners that I will leverage to go to the market.
Service maintenance and understanding that first-hand problem is the main thing. I mean, I am sitting out of New Haven, Connecticut. There is a company that is doing a project in Texas. My partner in Texas is way well suited to understand the line managers or warehouse operators' real problem than me, right? Now we can start establishing our team, but that's not good to scale per se, right? Like that becomes again a scaling challenge. Whereas we can leverage some of the partners that are already out there, that are already on that mission to help automotives or help manufacturers with automation that we can leverage as well by joining hands. And I think that was the motivation from the start. Like when we even went out and did some first projects with an automotive client, we got to know how that ecosystem works, how the ecosystem was enabling each other, and how they can scale up. Like one good example is the Japanese automotive industry. I don't know if you know, like how they operate is that their supplier base is also very nearby. So whenever, let's say Suzuki, Toyota, they would open up a plant, their supplier base would pop up nearby. There are trading houses like TTIPL, like Toyota Tsusho, Mitsubishi, Shinwa. Like there are some trading houses that would come up around those places to enable those suppliers to give it to those main manufacturers, right? So ecosystem starts growing. Now I think automation is still missing some of those ecosystems. There is a lot. Like by the way, there is a lot. Like you can see, good example is like Fanuc has a massive ecosystem, right? Like KUKA has a good ecosystem around there. Universal Robots partner program is
Mhm.
phenomenal. So there are examples on how these companies have scaled. The challenge is that those platforms didn't necessarily had too much intelligence on them. They were more of a hardware. I think now we are going to deal with the next phase of robotics, which is like how we are going to enable partners to cater to intelligent systems. It's a weird problem. Both are robots,
Yeah.
but now you have an incorporated intelligence on like AMRs, at least I can say that. And nowadays, new manipulators are coming up with incorporated intelligence or embedded intelligence, whatever you want to name it,
Yeah.
right? But that's going to be a good, again, problem where how you enable the ecosystem to cater to that.
Yeah. And I think that's very interesting way to go to the market. And I think, and if I can poke a little bit more on that,
Yeah.
because it's always interesting to learn that strategy, because I coming from my background was pretty much direct to consumer background.
Mm,
So like, hey, just go to clients and sell it and install it. So now when I see the partner program, it has a compelling value, right? You cannot be everywhere. It reduces overhead, and also helps you focus on the product, right? That's very important in a robotics field where things are changing at a light speed. So new product development, helps you develop on the product. But I think one thing that it or at least from my understanding, and I would like to correct myself as well if that's not the right understanding, is like you are insulated from the customer, right? Like, and how do you I'm sure you have a solution for that, but like how do you solve for that? Usually install happens, and then it's pretty much done deal, it works, it great. And if it doesn't work, they'll call the local support to solve for it. How do you get the feedback, or how would you, or what mechanisms have you implemented to solve for that?
a very good point again, right? Like even we went through this cycles that, okay, how to ensure we are not losing that direct feedback of the customer, right? And one of the things that we do, by the way, is that all the initial deployments that our partners are doing, we are in loop with them in the sense that we are on the field. Like our team would go on the field as well, understand the customer pain points, make sure we are doing the right thing with the customer. We work with our partners to figure out that whatever they are proposing to the end customer is also aligned, both from the capability point of view and kind of like the user pain point of view, right? It takes hard work. It takes the scaling becomes slower again because we have to be part of the loop here, right? But certain industries will start automating themselves. So think of it in this way that if we solve for tier two automotive gear manufacturing, let's take a very specific industry.
Hmm.
Now those standard solutions will start becoming part of the loop where we are getting the good feedback. We build that right solution for that particular segment and our partners can cater to that segment. Let's say tomorrow a new segment comes up, which is windshield, right? Like the windshield manufacturers want to use these platforms. We'll still be part of that and make sure that we are able to cater to those windshield manufacturers' problem with our partners. But then our partners can take it and scale it. So
Hmm.
think of it that we are working with our partners to do the heavy lifting, and our partners can go ahead and scale that later on once that heavy lifting has been done and the validation and all has been achieved.
Mm, interesting. Yeah, because I do agree that eventually robots will be table stakes in all the designs, right?
Yeah,
I think it's not the question of if, it's going to be question of why, when,
yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Because as I'm thinking about future warehouse designs, I completely think that if I have unlimited capital, right, I would love to go out and design a warehouse which has robots in and out, and it's humans are only needed where it's humans in the loop kind of thing needed,
Good.
and exception handling or maintenance or stuff like that, but everything else is
Decision
automated.
making.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's yeah, definitely it's good to know. No, that thank you for that. Appreciate it, because I think it was really insightful conversation when you think about the direct consumer model and then the partner model. Because as I said, I'm always on the direct consumer model, and it was easier for me to talk to customer that, hey, what is not wrong, what is right, kind of thing. But no, this is good. I think one last question as we talk about consumers and we talk about getting feedback. I think we just ended with two big shows, Automate and Modex, right? And you were at both of them. I was at Modex. I'm pretty sure you were at both of them. So, what are you most excited about after the shows?
Yeah, I mean, technology is scaling fast. Like we are seeing a lot of solutions coming up that are cheaper and that are better. And I think both of them are important. Like the cost has to go down significantly. Like I'm talking about, we are still probably 20, 30 times more expensive than what I believe robotics and automation systems are going to go at. And the speed is also slower. Like it hasn't scaled that fast. But I think now with Modex and Automate, both of the shows, like Automate, I can also mention some of the recent things that companies are doing, like how they're able to incorporate intelligence in a way smaller form factor of compute. Again, Nvidia might be enabling behind that, but like how they're able to do it significantly changes the potential of those platforms, right? Like previously, maybe I was not able to give that particular solution because the limitation was lying somewhere. Now I think that equation is changing. That
Mm.
solution is possible at a lower cost or
Oh,
adaptable
interesting.
cost, right? And I think this is gonna go in that direction, exponentially growth kind of thing again soon.
Oh, wow.
So very excited about that. If you talk about a particular technology, I would say vision systems and compute is becoming like very married to each other, which is a
Mm.
good thing. Like I think a lot of potentials are gonna open up.
Oh,
Some
interesting.
things like safety standards and all would have to evolve. So I think that is going to happen but I think the system would be built first and then the safety standards would evolve. But that's a regular life
Oh,
cycle for any technology, I guess.
yeah, for sure. No, that's exciting. Thank you, Rishabh. I think this has been a great conversation. I learned a lot about product development, about the problems that you're trying to solve, and just understanding the manufacturing world. So, thank you for taking time today. This has been a great conversation, and I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Part. Thanks a lot again. And yeah, let's do it soon again.
Yeah,
Appreciate the time and the discussion.
awesome. Thank you. You have been listening to Robot Forward Warehousing podcast with Parth Pithan. Stay connected with us by subscribing to the show on your favorite podcast player. If you like what you heard, please rate us and help us reach more warehouse robotics practitioners. Thank you for listening. Until next time.